Hi, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this session as part of Digital Week Online that I'm hosting, and my guests who I've invited are contributing to. This session is on cities and nations and the startup challenges and opportunities, especially in the COVID recovery world. I'd like to start by first introducing our panelists. We have three panelists from different parts of the world, and one of them is actually missing right now, but hopefully he'll join us as we move on with the session. And if not, we'll figure out a way to bring in either someone else or have John and Melanie make up for his absence. But to start off with, we have Melanie Moore. Melanie is a serial entrepreneur with 20 years experience in media, marketing, and mobile technology. In 2016, she founded Yay, a social commerce platform for authentic product recommendations. In 2018, she additionally became the founder and CEO of WOM Protocol. The WOM Protocol is scaling an entire blockchain leveraging ecosystem, enabling monetization of word of mouth recommendations for brands, creators, and publishers. Melanie is a member and global chair of the prestigious H2 network from Silicon Valley, as well as a chapter lead of the Disruption Disciples. She's a frequent speaker at tech, blockchain, and marketing events around the world. Calvin Ng from Hong Kong, who hasn't joined us yet, but hopefully he will. Calvin is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor with many successes under his belt. Calvin manages a blockchain and innovation fund in Hong Kong called Plutus Ventures. And this invests into many blockchain and technology companies around the world. He sits on the board of 2 online game startups, an e-commerce company, and an entertainment fashion commerce company in China. Calvin has extensive experience in the digital marketing, social networking, online games, and gaming space. In 2007, Calvin won 3rd place in China's national entrepreneur competition. To this date, he's still the only foreigner to have won a top placing in that event. John Sharp from Singapore. John is also a serial entrepreneur. We have a big day for serial entrepreneurs today. John is a serial entrepreneur and investor, the co-founding partner and chief architect of Hatcher Plus, a next-generation data-driven venture firm that utilizes a massive global database in combination with AI and machine learning-based technologies to identify early-stage opportunities in partnership with leading accelerators and investors worldwide. In the last 4 years, John has led capital raising at Hatcher, and Hatcher has accumulated a very impressive 150 plus portfolio of venture investments in early stage companies around the world. I'll quickly introduce myself, and then we can go through some discussion topics relating to our panel today. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. So I actually come from a banking background. And I'm almost ashamed to say it now, 30 years of experience in banking. I don't know, every year I have to keep updating it by 5 years, it seems. Maybe, 1 year is a dog's life for us these days. But I left the banking industry 12 years ago, and I've been involved in various entrepreneurial ventures in renewable energy, in media and entertainment, and now for IR technology. I'm CEO of a company in Hong Kong called Deutsche Million Ventures, which I categorize as a venture building companies around 4IR technologies such as fintech and digital asset exchanges in particular, and startup investing, of course. So with that, let me start the discussion. I think it would be interesting, since we have the benefit of having a small panel on this call, I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit more about each of your businesses, John and Melanie, and to understand exactly the type of focus that you have with your current commercial initiatives right now. We can start perhaps with Melanie.
Okay, thanks Asad for the lovely intro, and Digital Week for hosting this event. I'm coming out of media and marketing 20 years and dived into blockchain technology around 2016, 17, and started then developing the WOM protocol since 2018. And as I'm coming out of this media and marketing space, I saw this great misalignment of interest in the publishing and media industry, where we know it when we are using YouTube, the highest engagement is the skip button, skipping the ad. No one kind of wants to see these ads anymore. And therefore the question is, in the future, how can publishers, how can social networks monetize when people tend to have a skip and a swipe finger? And what format would people watch? And this is where we discovered word of mouth marketing, the oldest marketing on planet Earth, the most effective form of marketing. And we wanted to build a whole suite, a whole ecosystem of technology to leverage word of mouth marketing to enable everyone who's making product recommendations to monetize them, and to allow brands and advertisers to tap into this gold mine of content and use it instead of advertisements. And therefore reach new customers through old customers who are in love with your products. And this whole set of technology we have already built now. So we started developing the concept and doing the research in 18. We started developing the technology in 19. And in 20, we started testing the technology, and we are actually already scaling it. We have integrated the blockchain leveraging MarTech solution in the first birth-giving platform, but you can integrate it later on in any e-commerce platform, in any social network. And wherever someone is making a recommendation, this recommendation runs through an authentication process where actually communities are rating the content before the content shows up into a huge decentralized campaign manager, something comparable to a Google AdWords, which, as you know, Google AdWords is responsible for 86% of Google revenues. So it's a huge MarTech solution. And we have built something similar to that, but decentralized, meaning any social network and e-commerce platform kind of can be integrated and plugged in. And we're testing it currently, scaling it. And the beauty of it is, you know, when Bitcoin came up, and when people were discovering it, and the first miners downloading the software, installing it on the right hardware, and starting to earn Bitcoin for delivering their service to a network of computers. And that was coming out of a more geeky crowd. So you had to have an understanding of technology, of software and hardware to be part of this network. Now, what we have built is enabling anyone to mine by creating content, validating content, and delivering the content, being a platform that is the interface for engagement. And therefore, it's very easy. And I believe that this next phase of adoption in the blockchain and crypto space will be driven by easy use cases people can easily replicate, understand, and make use of. So that's why I'm also a fan of gaming and all the blockchain cases in the gaming industry. Now we have, you know, the rise of NFTs, and everyone is going crazy, and you hear it and see it across the news. And this is where I believe that, you know, this is the best opportunity to make people understand that this is the next phase of the internet, where we are. It's gonna, you know, revolutionize as we have today. We don't know how to live, it's like air when we are out of, you know, without internet, when the Wi-Fi isn't working. And similar to that, we will have this feeling later on that this value transfer between people will be done by this new decentralized technology.
Wow, that's very, very impressive. John, I'm not sure how you can ever beat that, but I'm sure you'll give it a shot.
John, you're muted.
You might want to unmute first to start.
I think I'll just say nothing and just invest instead. I think that's probably the best response.
Yeah, how can we invest in WOM, basically?
That was a great overview. It sounds excellent what you're doing there, and well overdue, I think, and with a very solid recognition of what the real world is going into. What we're doing is a little similar in a way. We're innovating in an age-old business. Our view is that venture capital, strange. So venture capital is a place that's supposedly populated by very high IQ, very well-connected, very smart people that understand success, understand how to scale business, understand how to recognize innovation and follow through with it. What we've found is that is all true with respect to businesses that VCs invest in. So they're great partners to have if you want to understand how to scale your business, grow, pull in capital, grow your business, take a piece of innovation and turn it and commercialize it. Great to have a VC as a partner in that instance. But what we've found, and we've looked inside many dozen VCs and accelerators around the world, what we've found is that they're less good at innovating and creating opportunities for their own businesses, and not very good at scaling those businesses. There's a handful of businesses we could name of VC brands that have scaled over the last 50 or 60 years, but there's not very many that have actually scaled. Most VCs operate inside of silos, using black box strategies to find companies, invest in them. They're very guarded about their deal flow, very proprietary about their deals, and they try and sort of protect their value by investing in those deals and not sharing them. So it's almost the opposite to many of the kind of systematic approaches that they would invest in. Their own approaches are these sort of these sort of non-innovative, highly manual, highly proprietary, siloed sort of technologies. And when I was running my first fund, I found that to be quite odd as a sort of mismatch between what the capabilities were of a venture capital company and what they didn't do themselves. We also did some research that found out that the average VC invests around $50,000 a year in technology and data. The average investment bank invests billions. And there's quite a mismatch. The VCs are still managing a lot of money, and we found that the investment in technology wasn't there. The investment in data wasn't there. Of course, there are some companies doing this, but by and large, we found this was a complete mismatch. And so when we finished our first, and we discovered something else as well. We discovered that basically every time you create a portfolio of seed stage companies, you can expect one out of every 100 of those companies to go on and have $1 billion plus outcome. And we also discovered that basically investors select at a rate of 1 in 100. So the idea that you can find a unicorn is a 1 in 10,000 bet. Now that infers that you need some kind of engine or some kind of systematic approach there to really have a predictable outcome. So at Hatcher Plus, what we've done is we've set about creating that. We've invested $10 million to date in technology and data, building a systematic, scalable approach to venture that enables us to greatly expand the amount of deal flow that we can have through our system, the amount of data that we can analyze, the amount of partners that we can have, our ability to be transparent. So what we're looking to do is really transform the venture industry by applying data, technology, different processes, and highly scalable approaches to venture investing, which we think is just super exciting because we believe this is the next wave of venture capital. And our ability to make good on that promise will create a new asset class that is more likely to return returns that will look like an index fund versus these sort of like highly volatile returns that you get when you look across the venture industry. So we essentially, to sum up, we want to create an index fund for venture, or a series of index funds for ventures across strategies, across sectors, across geographies, across stages over the coming years. We're already, as Assad mentioned, over 100 companies, well over 100 companies into this strategy. We want to build a portfolio of 1,500 companies that people can buy into in a much more transparent way in the coming years. And we're excited about what we can do with that. In terms of how this fits into a blockchain context, over the course of the last 18 months, we've been convincing our service providers and auditors and lawyers to digitize all their processes, how they touch us on the platform. And so the first phase is to do digitization of that. The second phase is to start hashing some of the components of that and move to a place where every single action that happens on the platform it can be understood, audited, recorded, and create this wonderful environment where we truly understand what's going on here and can trace this back over several years and see the results of all our activities. So I'll stop there, but that's how this kind of fits together a little bit with what One Protocol's doing.
Well, thanks, John. Well, having known John for the last few years and also having met Melanie before, I know how much progress both of you have made in your businesses in the last few years. And John in particular, since we are in the same neighborhood, my being in Malaysia, you being in Singapore, and us exploring common ventures together, as well as, of course, Deutsche Malayan Ventures and our group being startup and seed stage investors also. I know how truly disruptive the Hatcher platform is and how exciting it is for the startup investment community. As a banker in my earlier years, although these days as a techpreneur, I don't like to admit I ever was a banker, but as a banker in my earlier years, I like to recall how startup investing was just never ever part of our institutional investor portfolio, and and it still is very difficult actually for large family offices, large institutions to put small ticket sizes at work, in a broad enough portfolio. Yes, you have large startup kind of clusters like what you see in Y Combinator, 500 startups, plug and play. A lot of them, good or bad, are based out of Silicon Valley. I think the trend is still accumulating around the world, but it's still not enough if you want to put $100 million to work right away. You can do that with SoftBank. You can do that with other large private equity companies because they target kind of bulge bracket, as they call it, deals. But it's very difficult to write $50,000 or $100,000 checks and do that 1,000 times and accumulate a portfolio. And Hatcher has targeted that part of the challenge in the marketplace. When I speak to some of my family office and H&W type contacts in my network, I always tell them that I said, you need to allocate 101 in finance is that the earlier you invest, the higher your return. Yes, the higher your risk as well. But where Hatcher is approaching it through its AI-driven approach is by essentially mapping that risk out in such a way that it's predictable, so that it's not just, well, one guy is going to make 1,000 times and another guy is going to lose it all. In between, there's a happy medium, and that happy medium is driven by sample size, by portfolio size, by the amount of data that you absorb into your approach, and that's what Hatcher has been doing very successfully. So I really commend him on what he's achieved and successfully sort of like taken to the next level of growth. And Melanie, equally, I see you over the last year or two, really all over the social media platforms and the global conference and networking platforms, and making a very strong voice for these disruptive new innovations. What you just described about WOM, is a window into how big that opportunity is, how truly kind of like how much it can move the needle. And it's encouraging to see that, we have this type of, that you have this type of success with these type of disruptive ideas. Sometimes disruptive ideas are great, but they're just that. They're disruptive ideas that end up like, just sort of fiddling around at the fringe. But I think both these initiatives have successfully moved the needle. So I congratulate you on that. Let me take a moment to introduce our, I would call him our sub-panelist, not because he's a subsidiary in any way, but because he substituted for Calvin, who was unable to make it from Hong Kong. And it's pretty impressive that he managed to do it in 5 minutes when I gave him a text saying, hey, you want to join a digital online conference? And he said, sure. And and I know why he would say that, because he's no stranger at all to media and the conference platform. He's really a big advocate for startups and for the digital transformation agenda, both in Malaysia as well as regionally, and has a very strong voice here in all of the public platforms, including television, radio, etc., where he's featured fairly prominently. So I'd like to welcome Aaron Sharma to our little forum here. Aaron is a serial entrepreneur. I think we've heard that before. Aaron is a serial entrepreneur with experience in technology, digital media, and retail. He founded Touristly in 2015 and sold it to AirAsia in 2017. Touristly was later rebranded to Vidi and has now become AirAsia.com, where Aaron remains a non-executive board member. He's a general partner in Scale Up Malaysia, an accelerator looking to help startups build and scale it to the next level. And Scale Up Malaysia has a target of investing in 50 companies in the next 3 years. Be interesting for us to debate, perhaps in a different forum, not today, the difference between the deep dive approach that Aaron has, investing in 50 companies in 3 years, and the spray and pray on steroids that John has, investing in 1,000 companies in 3 months. But that's for perhaps a different forum. Today we're talking about the challenges and opportunities with cities and governments for startup technologies and for the digital transformation agenda. So with that, let me start by asking a couple of questions. I'm glad that we have a small forum, but I'm still mindful that we've used up, almost half of our time. So I want to give you, the panelists, the opportunity to talk about some of the discussion subjects. Of course, NFTs, you just mentioned it, Melanie. It's kind of the flavor of the day. It's hot. It's, you've got talk show hosts in America talking about it. People are calling me saying, we need to get into this NFT thing. What is it? So what is it, Melanie, and how is WOM going to be involved in it?
Well, I mean, at the end, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, enable us now to take ownership of a single action in the digital space, similar to owning one house, real estate, or an artwork that you have on the wall. You can now own digital art, content, and music, and anything kind of creative. You can create a so-called non-fungible token that is only existing kind of once, that is unique, and represents a potential, value or value share of a digital piece of content or artwork. And therefore, I think what got everyone excited now is that especially the artist scene started tapping into this and saying, well, this sounds like a wonderful way for us to get valued and monetize in new ways. And after now Steve Aoki, one famous DJ, made a 3 million for one with an NFT, everyone was, of course, in that moment saying, oof, this sounds now real, when such an artist is able to monetize like this in such a short period of time. And therefore, we still have to be careful. It's still a lot of hype, I would say. We have to dive deeper in what the real use cases are. And we should not forget that still the question is, where does this digital thing that is worth an NFT live? And is it living on centralized servers? Is it living on a content platform? What happens if this content platform shuts down? What happens if the artist is taking down the piece of content, the artwork, the music? And therefore, I think we need to understand exactly, what the technology is made for and what it can do, and where are still, the risks. And I think we shouldn't, push too much of the hype and just, of course, embrace it, because at the end, it allows us now to speak about it. More people are looking into it. And when they are looking in NFTs, then they're also looking into Bitcoin. And with the rise of Bitcoin, they're also looking into Bitcoin. And so everything that is happening currently, I would say, is is just positive for our industry, even if it has some risks that some people still might be too enthusiastic and lose some money. I mean, that, you know, is in, like in games, it just might happen. But overall, I see it's positive. It's innovative, and we should definitely all look into it.
Okay, so basically we get all in is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, definitely an interesting space to discover and research. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think, you know, it's always interesting to look at these successive trends that emerge and capture the public imagination. It's NFTs today, especially in North America. But, you know, if you look at even what Robinhood did and the whole GameStop phenomenon, that was quite a phenomenon. I mean, quite a cultural revolution that's happening and still is being debated. If you look at crypto in the last year, since 2020, crypto has really captured the public imagination and become something that, you know, I know when my dad, who's 85 years old, calls me up and says, "What is this Bitcoin? Should I be buying some?" That, you know that it is something that's being filtered into all levels of society. So coming more into the point of today's, I guess, discussion topic, we're talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that cities and government face in the digital transformation agenda that we all no doubt have and has been accelerated by the whole COVID situation, the whole COVID crisis, if you can call it, the COVID opportunity for some people, if you can look at it that way. Now, in Malaysia, Aaron, you know, we've discussed, both you and I are based here, and I think Malaysia has done some very interesting things with regards to the digital transformation agenda. It's been accelerated certainly by the onset of COVID, and as a country, despite it being a small country, they've invested a very large proportion of their of their recovery program into the digital transformation agenda. At the same time, you know, it's probably not too surprising that institutions, governments, bureaucracies, they really don't have their finger on the pulse of what's required to facilitate such a successful transformation. It's best left to the private sector. At the same time, you've got things like London Tech City, et cetera, that, you know, are government-led initiatives that have been very successful. What would you say, Aaron, about Malaysia's effort, or, you know, if not Malaysia, just around the region, what we see? The government wants us to digitally transform. In many ways, we are. Are they doing a good job or not?
Cool. Hi. Thanks, Asad. Thanks, everyone. Good to be here. Yes, it was pretty last minute coming aboard. I mean, you literally called me like 5 minutes ago, but it's good to see familiar faces, and, you know, nice to.
I hope you've already had a couple
well.
of tigers or whatever it is. You know, since it's 7 p.m. over here.
Yeah, I should have grabbed one actually. Exactly. Yeah, but to your question about like Malaysia as a country and the way it's responded, we just had a rollout of what's called the My Digital Blueprint by the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, I've been kind of public about my views about it, but I think maybe I'll start with what I think is kind of interesting about what the country has done. Malaysia is actually one of the first countries in the region to take some sort of initiative in the digital space. We started in 1996 with the Multimedia Super Corridor, which was at the time quite forward-thinking and quite revolutionary in terms of putting the country in a place where we could attract foreign direct investments and attract knowledge sharing into the country. And back then, of course, the M in MSC stands for multimedia, as you may be aware, which is now a different thing altogether. Now it's more about digital economy and about developing the digital development of the country. So we did a really good job back in the day, and some would say that in the last 20-some years, we may have kind of lost our way, and I guess these things happen with like new governments coming into place. But I think, and over the years, what's happened is we've had multiple agencies within the government spearhead different types of support for the digital ecosystem. So there were guys who focused on like, the what we call the below 40 community, people who are a little slightly impoverished, the guys who focus on the startup ecosystem, the guys who focus on SMEs. And I think there are different agencies that have come into play. And what has happened is they've announced this My Digital initiative, which was a top-down approach to help us deal with the digital economy in the years to come. And the most significant thing about it is that the Prime Minister himself is chairing a council to kind of drive the digital economy, which to me is a great signal, because it shows that the highest levels of government are saying that the digital economy is important to the economic growth of the country. And that's what we're putting behind this initiative, right? My challenge with it mostly comes in terms of the initiatives itself, because I find them very broad. I would wish to be very focused, but we're doing a little bit of everything in every single space. And I feel like we could be a lot bolder, because I think we've actually done a lot of things in the past that we can build on top of. One really encouraging thing is that we've got a huge initiative for 5G rollout within the country, which I think will really be significant in helping us attract foreign investments and actually spearhead a lot of the 4IR technologies that we're talking about, which I think will be significant for the country in the future. So I think the government has its heart in the right place. I think it needs to work, as Asad mentioned, a lot more with the private sector to spearhead a lot of these things. I think if it does that and allows the private sector to grow the economy, but with the support of the government, I think we can go very far. Even though Malaysia is kind of a small country, I think there's a lot of potential here.
Can I just jump in? I was just very excited to see that Malaysia just opens the first insured Bitcoin fund. So that also just happened now. I mean,
really?
that's also exciting. Yeah.
That is exciting, yeah.
So they are also getting forward in this space, which is great.
Yeah, I think like in the,
in
the crypto space.
I think you can appreciate. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think in the crypto space and blockchain, a lot of interesting projects actually happening across different types of companies. We see big companies like I know for a fact AirAsia is playing with a little bit of this as well. I know that some of the guys in Celcom are looking at some blockchain stuff as well. Really interesting kind of initiatives there, as well as in the crypto space. A lot of guys are trying to get some things off the ground. Even though on the regulatory front, I think there's some work to be done, but I think we're moving in the right direction here. Sorry, Asad, you were saying.
Well, I was just saying that I think you can appreciate why I invited Aaron to join this panel last minute, because those are some very interesting insights. Thank you for that. I'll transfer 1 Bitcoin to your account later.
That's good.
That's great. 1 Bitcoin's great.
What do I need to do now? What do I need to do?
You guys, you guys all heard that, right? Like
you need to do something for 2 Bitcoins. Anyway, so thanks very much. But I think look, I share those sentiments because we have not only observed them, but we've also tried to participate in them. So there are huge opportunities undoubtedly in this environment in which so much change is happening so quickly. At the same time, the challenges, I would say, are driven by who is executing that change and what understanding do they have for executing that change. But anyway, you spoke to some of those points. I appreciate that and thank you. Let me move on to another question, which is, I would say, more positive: the opportunities to interconnect these into. I remember, in my earlier one of my first venture as a non-banker when I went into the business world was setting up long-range Wi-Fi networks, in cities. This is pre, I guess, having the fat broadband pipeline that you had for, that we enjoy today. But in that, there was a very big incentive for various cities to interconnect with each other, so they effectively created a meshed network that benefited from each other's capabilities, that allowed them to share loads and capacity, that had economies of scale in terms of the infrastructural elements of the rollout. It was certainly a very big learning curve for me at the time, having left a world that a non-technology world into it. Now today, I think the same opportunity exists in tying smart cities and tying, digital technology sort of hubs into each other. Melanie's in Berlin, John's in Singapore, Aaron's in Kuala Lumpur, and people are all over the world. How can we benefit from tying these cities into each other? How can that accelerate the change of digital transformation?
Can I pick up on that? I think one thing that I've noticed, I used to work in the satellite industry in the 90s, and satellite is a point to multi-point technology for the most part. Yes, you can have a phone call via satellite, but for the most part, you put a satellite up there with the objective of broadcasting to 10 or 15 or 100 million people one piece of content. And I think what we're seeing right now is a transformation, and you mentioned Robinhood, you mentioned these various other democratizing technologies. What we're seeing is a transformation, I think, away from an internet that still operates on a point to multi-point basis. So on the internet, you'll have TMZ.com broadcasting to a world of people that want to find out information about that fan. It's very difficult, information about a celebrity, but it's very difficult for the fan that's sitting the other side of that to have a similar presence and to go back the other way. It's becoming easier, but if you talk to any of our kids, that's their dream, right? They want to be that person that's broadcasting in the other direction. I use the term broadcasting very loosely here. And I think one of the trends that we're going to see is that one of the things that drives me batty, by the way, is when I see that BBC thing that opens up with that promo with just the major cities of the world crossing the screen. There's someone that grew up in a very small country town in Australia. That kind of thinking drives me nuts, because it's not just about Los Angeles. It's not just about London and New York. It's about every other place in between. And one of the beauties of the internet and of blockchain and of Bitcoin and all of it and Robinhood is these are things that are massively democratizing things that were really the province of the elite before. Like someone said to me the other day, they said, oh, this blockchain, this Bitcoin thing, it's going to go the way of the tulip. And I said, no, there's a fundamental difference between a tulip and a Bitcoin. And that is, you can take a Bitcoin, you can split that into 1,000 parts. You can't take a tulip bulb and cut it up. You've got a fractionalized approach to wealth creation here that's available to everybody. And I love the fact that Bitcoin is available to folks in the middle of the desert in Australia, and it's available to people sitting in the middle of New York. I think that's a wonderful thing. Content isn't there yet. I'm listening with great interest to what Melanie's doing in that area. But if you're a small city trying to compete with a large city, which is, I guess, where I wanted to end up here with this comment, if you're a small city, we deal with accelerators in small cities all the time. There's a little town council that's trying to produce startups out of a small town in Malaysia or a small city in Australia or a small city in Europe. And they really struggle with getting the respect and the connectivity to the rest of the world that they think those local entrepreneurs would benefit from. And what I see happening now through the efforts of Hatcher, but also with a lot of other folks like Plug and Play you mentioned earlier, is you see a lot more connectivity being formed between tier 2, tier 3 cities. China is doing an excellent job of this, by the way, of connecting all of these cities at various levels such that there's more of a greater leveling and that we're all sort of living in one big cyber city, which is, I think, where all this ends up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John. We're no longer living in a city. We're living in a cyber city when we move off the physical infrastructure and we move into the digital infrastructure. And why can't the smallest villages and the rural communities also be captured in those cyber cities? Sorry, I got a call in between. I hope that didn't disrupt the thing.
No, that's the benefit, of course, of having a common currency, which, of course, Bitcoin is an emerging common currency, having common frameworks like Internet Protocol, hopefully like One Protocol, having these common methods. And what we're doing with funds is we're trying to democratize access to venture capital. We're saying, why do you need $1 million to invest in venture capital? That's not right. You should be able to do just what you're doing on Robinhood. Instead of investing in public equities, you should be able to invest in private equities. Now, we've got a way to go. I can see Aaron nodding there because I think he probably agrees. We've got a ways to go from a regulatory perspective, but I fundamentally disagree with the concept that I, as an individual person, should be able to go out and buy something like Tesla, but I shouldn't be able to buy a startup in my local community without, somehow entering some kind of gray area from a regulatory perspective.
Surely there's still, I mean, the last mile inclusion and, capturing the bottom of pyramid, as they call it, communities like rural communities, farming communities, et cetera, that are sort of offline still and don't enjoy the benefits of the whole digital revolution. Surely that remains a problem and also an opportunity. Perhaps interconnecting, kind of hubs, don't have to call them cities anymore, but just hubs that allow for the for the spoking of that of those solutions to reach and penetrate into the last mile communities can be something interesting.
And vice versa, coming back the other way as well. I saw a thing, just a very quick story, I saw a thing the other night on Australia where this guy was using AI to spot weeds in his crop. He'd put video cameras connected with an AI machine. It was basically in the middle of Queensland, somewhere in Australia. And as he ran his plow across the crop, it would spot the weeds and would put just a tiny little bit of pesticide on the weeds. And at the end of the story, the reporter said, yeah, what has this done to your cost? He said, well, it's reduced my cost of weed killer by 97%. And I immediately took the reaction of that going, wow, as a consumer, you've just decreased the amount of weed killer in my food as well by doing that. And then, but the thing that really came across is this is a guy in the middle of Queensland. He had no idea that this is a technology that could scale just right around the world. And so it probably stops there as an interesting story from a country town in Australia. But one of the things I would love to see happen is for that guy to be able to go on the internet, connect his idea, and then have that reach out and connect with investors around the world that may have an interest in that thing. And for that guy to know that those kind of opportunities exist equally for him, as opposed to some guy that's sitting in the middle of Silicon Valley.
Right. Okay. So now, go ahead, Melanie.
No, I just wanted to understand. So thinking about any sort of crowdfunding, and we had the Kickstarters already, some years ago. I think that's now this interesting opportunity when we think about Kickstarter. And for example, I think Oculus, the first VR glasses that were coming up there, and people started investing in it and giving I don't know what it cost at that time to participate, $800 or something to get the first prototype. Or something like this. I have no idea. And then, they finally got their Oculus, and the prototype, and really they helped building the company, right? I mean, this is what, after this, and now Facebook acquired it. And at the end, what do these people have today that really empowered the first prototyping of this new innovation? They have an old prototype probably somewhere in the cellar, right? If they would have had, for example, Oculus token, or, something that, that
very well said.
Yeah, that can rise in value over time, they would be better off than just being a tester of a prototype version. And therefore,
so here's something that created billions of dollars in value, but for regulatory reasons, Kickstarter was unable to give them a token or some other form of security that would have rewarded these people who created this value in the first place. You're absolutely right.
Exactly. Yeah. So just wanted to add this example.
No, I think it's a very interesting example, Melanie, because it got me thinking of something that is a problem I've been trying to solve for a long time as an entrepreneur, which is as a banker, I had a joke that we could raise $1 billion lunch. It was very easy. You just pick up the phone and 5 institutions all give you, $200 million and you're done. Big, large, publicly listed companies have efficient access to capital, whether it's debt or equity. Small startup companies have very inefficient access to capital. Sort of, it can take you years to get a business off the ground. And even once you're getting going, you're still participating in kind of there's a lot of white space there that one has to fill up. Admittedly, I think private companies, especially the sexy unicorn stories, have managed to achieve valuations that exceed what perhaps the public market would give them. Some of these companies don't make any income and at the same time have billions of dollars of valuation. Admittedly, that's true, but again, they're called unicorns for a reason. That's the exception, not the rule. So I think that one of the questions I really did have, and it's something that I genuinely feel that we need a proper answer to, is what is the future of early stage investing, and how can we make that more efficient? How can governments help with that? How can other stakeholders help with it? And I'm on the phone from time to time with the big private equity funds or the big institutional funds, and their mindset has really not changed very much. They still have to go through the checklist, right, of like filling out all the criteria. How much money do you make? Are you revenue positive, and this and that? And a lot of companies really don't fall into that thing. What can we do to help?
Difficult question, because at the end it's the regulator, right? I mean, there needs to be a discussion with wherever you're setting up a structure that allows people to invest into equity in an early stage, like Hatcher is doing it. I think John is a trailblazer, and we can learn from that also in other cities. So John, I hope you speak already to some guys in Berlin. In this ecosystem.
No, I've been to the factory in Berlin. We've actually got a couple of our partners that are trialing our software there at the moment. But to pick up on your comment just now, I think one thing I noticed, we're just out at lunch today with some very senior executives of a bank here in Singapore, and one of the things we're talking about with them is how you change the perception of early stage investing, because right now it's viewed to be extremely risky. But the analysis that we've done is, well, it's actually not very risky at all. You just need to do it a lot. If you invest in 10 startups, you'll probably fail. If you invest in 1,000, then you'll get a 4 or 5x return. It's the difference is really that stark. And it's literally you're tossing, we actually mentioned this to a family office in the Middle East the other day, and they said, yeah, we get it. They said, we drill 100 wells. The 100th well will spout oil, and it forgives all the other costs that we had associated with that drilling process. So everyone gets it at a fundamental level that yes, if you invest in enough startups early on, like Aaron's doing, like we're doing, you will make money from that if you invest in enough of them. It's a constant advocacy process. 3 years ago, we were one of the few people out there in the world, along with people like Dave McClure and the founders of YCOM and YC and others that were promoting this as a story. What's happened in the last year is some very respected researchers from Google Ventures, INSEAD, Institutional Investor, Harvard Business Review, AngelList, have all come out in support of the strategy that we're executing and saying, well, actually, investing in this really large number of startups, like Aaron's doing in Malaysia, like we're doing globally, is the way to go, because you greatly reduce your risk by doing that. But guess what? You grow up the ecosystem so nicely in doing that as well, because these startups could be from any city in Malaysia. They could be from any city in Europe when you take that approach, because you have to build up a large portfolio. So it democratizes, it de-risks, and it creates a much more predictable set of returns for people. But it is an advocacy process. This is going to take us a little while to get to the point where this is the accepted reality. We're still in the early stages, but I do feel a much greater level of acceptance these days for this as a scientific truth than 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's about
you're
right.
talking to Middle East already. That's also, I think, very good to hear. Would love to hear more where exactly in the Middle East, but maybe
I worked there for
in
a long
a private
time.
DM.
No, I worked there for a long time, and look, I think the Middle East is rather a misunderstood place. Actually, I'm a big fan, and one thing I noticed over there is they are doing a great job, as is Malaysia, of creating startup economies and startup ecosystems, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Now, it helps that they've got such a young population, right? Because the vibrancy and just the energy and the currency that you have with this population that's essentially selling to itself is huge, right? You can't underestimate that. So I think the Middle East has a huge bonus with its youthful population, as does Malaysia and parts of Southeast Asia. These are things that are not replicated in Europe and America.
So true.
Okay. Aaron, do you want to add anything to that? I saw you were trying to say something earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that's about right in terms of getting investments done. Perhaps clearly our approach is slightly more high touch, or rather a lot more high touch than what John is doing. But we come from the same place, right? We also recognized early on that we can't do this where we back 5 companies and then hope for the best, right? We had to do a certain volume of companies. And that 5-year benchmark, by the way, was to be by 2022. And we're already at 21 companies as of last week that we've invested in. So we should hit 50 by next year, but every year we'll probably do 20 companies or so. And we can keep doing that so long as we can keep raising for the companies. I do think that one thing that governments and like organizations can do is we need to support a lot more early stage plays, right? We need a lot. So like for John's model to work and for my model to work, we need like 1,000 guys to have started some sort of project somewhere and possibly fail so that we can pick up the guys that we want to take bets on. And it's all a funnel that goes into that eventual one success story or one unicorn. So I just feel like sometimes the governments overcorrect and then they say, oh, we're going to invest in Series A businesses, or we're going to invest in like follow-on funding, when really what they need to do is create like make more little fish in the sea, and then let the experience view from there and then forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think the world we live in also, this is more a philosophic comment, but I think it's interesting to consider, is that we live in a polarized world where you have a small number of people with vast resources. And for them, we have to create these type of portfolio approaches to addressing this opportunity, which I think John, someone like Hatcher, is doing. And we also have to create scalable, groundbreaking opportunities, which, Melanie, someone like you, is doing, which, are interesting enough to attract their eyeballs and attention. And the rest of the world is, I don't want to call them bottom of pyramid, but, you really have this polarized world where a small number of people, are thinking in the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, and a large number of people are thinking in the hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. You mentioned the crowdsourcing solutions to deliver capital to companies, and I think something like we were talking about, the cultural phenomena like Robinhood and GameStop, something like that shows you there is also power in that segment. If you can organize ways to funnel their interest into opportunities, even though people may not be writing $100,000 checks, they might be writing $100 checks, a way that allows that community to reach those opportunities. That's also a powerful thing. It will be transformative for for the companies that are looking for capital to do that.
Look, I think it's
Germany,
kind of,
for example,
I really agree with
Melanie,
what you're saying, and I think it's kind of backwards that as a 25-year-old, you haven't earned your stripes yet as an accredited investor, so you can't invest in the kind of stuff that could actually multiply your wealth by many, many times, right? So you have to wait until you've multiplied your wealth by other times, become an accredited investor, and then when you've got a wife and kids, and the part I'm speaking as a male here, but when you've got all these other, you've got a mortgage and all these other things to support, then you're supposed to turn around and support startups. It's all backwards to my mind. You should allow millennials to invest in millennials, and we should loosen up the regulation to the point where we just facilitate the creation of these technologies by more of a global approach, and just loosen up the regulations a little.
And the thing is that especially not even millennials, Gen Z, the very young ones, they are already doing it, and they are doing it with crypto, and they don't care about regulations. So it's somehow happening, and I see them in all these Telegram groups. You have all these crypto kids already out there, and they're just investing in NFTs and investing in all sorts of, blockchain and crypto startups. And it's just happening. They just take it. They don't ask.
What did Peter Thiel say? He said that he said creativity is innovation in the face of regulation.
Yes.
I think it's very well, the line very well stated.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we're just warming up as a panel. I think we could probably go on for a couple of hours. But as John's backdrop has indicated, and clearly that's a real backdrop that he has, because it started bright and sunny in the evening, and now we've advanced into the sunset. Melanie is in LA, and it's probably 3 a.m. her time. So thank you very much for making me 3:30. Okay, well you can go out to the clubs. So thank you for staying up for us, or waking up early, whichever end of the stick you're on. Aaron, thank you very much for joining in at last moment. Really appreciate that.
It was fun. Thanks, guys.
That Bitcoin thing was a joke. You understand? I'm
the witnesses.
I'm a satirical host.
The whole world has seen it. Yeah.
Witnesses.
This is a smart contract right
my
here.
My connection just went bad, so I'm not sure what you're saying. But anyway, that was a very, very enjoyable hour that we spent together. I hope we get to do this more often. Thank you very much for Digital Week Online, for Studium, for Dennis Guarda and his team, Hilton, Supra, for organizing today's session. I will hand it back exactly on the dot at 7:30 back to our hosts. And thank you again for your contribution.
Thanks, Asad.
Thanks, Asad.